That's our architectural meeting. So as I mentioned before, I have a couple topics. I see that Prabhu has already joined us. So maybe Prabhu, you can start, and then I will switch to another topic that I have.
Yeah, sure. Hold on.
Maybe you can share just share the screen with the document and describe the background and context and how you propose to like solve the issue.
Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. As you all know, like we are redefining the filtering for GraphQL. So the thing is, we came up with a problem wherein whenever a custom filterable attribute is being added to a product, it has to be reflected on the schema so that the clients can use that attribute to filter it. The problem is we need to clean the cache and refresh the schema every time an attribute is being added. So it is quite an expensive operation. So I came up with a proposal wherein it's kind of a generic filtering. So you give the possible the attributes which can be possibly filtered in a generic format. Like, so there are like three different types of filtering. One is equal filter where you can see the where you can do the equals operation, and there is a like filter where you can do any like operation, and there is a range filter which is used for the price ranges. So these are the only three possible types of filters. And if we can take the attributes for these filters in form of an array, and then so on the back end we can consume this different attributes, and then we can do the possible filtering. So instead of refreshing the schema every time whenever we add an attribute, this can be used as a generic filtering proposal. I already shared this with Alex and Olga, and they already have comments. So not sure if everyone have seen this already. You have any comments on this, Olga?
Yes, like just my general comment is it's not, so you mostly describe how aggregations will work, and for aggregation it looks fine. It's like you just want to get different like aggregation by different fields, and probably that's fine. While I'm not sure how it's supposed to work for filtering. So you usually want to filter by specific field, and if you don't have schema, how can you do it if you don't know even which fields exist?
So the filtering is driven based on the output. So whenever the client goes to the front end and he searches, so the aggregations are being written. So which is in the new model as well. So the clients will know what are the possible fields that can be filtered on. So it need not be essentially present on the schema, but rather it is driven from the output of the previous query. So they can use.
Yeah, let's look at this scenario. So I want to filter products somehow. Most likely I know how I want them. So there is search probably, and then there is layered navigation. So this is in context of layered navigation, right? We are discussing
yes.
this. And also there is sorting as well, which is not part of layered navigation. It's just you just want to sort by something. And then somebody can implement just custom search, like as we have advanced search, for example, where you would need to specify fields by which you want to filter. So like as I understand your proposal, your flow would look like first you, let's say on PWA, you draw the products listing, and with that you get all the aggregations, right?
Yes.
And now you know what filters exist, right? And after that you can probably ask user to filter by whatever is possible. Like you can just list all the fields and the user can filter.
Yeah. So
but if you don't have layered navigation, you cannot filter because you don't know the fields. Like you need this additional request for aggregations, right?
Yes. So let's see another case, right? So when we are dynamically updating the possible attributes on the schema, it might even like go beyond like 100 different attributes, right? But still, for the clients to know what are the possible stuff they can even show on the UI. So how will they even know like what are the stuff they can possibly show on the UI? It has to be driven by the aggregations, right?
I guess so in when schema changes if somebody goes to admin, for example, and creates another AAV attribute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody goes to the code or installs extension and it adds some custom attributes, probably, right? What other use cases we have? So it's either code changes or it's an AAV attribute added on the admin. We probably are not very concerned about the first case because in case you update the code, most likely, yes, you need to check your PWA as well. Maybe you can add more features, maybe something is removed. But we are mostly concerned about admin adding attributes, correct?
Yes.
So we need to clear cache after that.
Yeah, and the clients need to know that an attribute has been added, and they have to clear the cache. And so the thing is, I am not aware if there is any cache tags associated with a GraphQL schema invalidation. And whenever a GraphQL schema itself is invalidated, the schema stitching and the schema parsing takes a lot of time compared to like any other invalidation. It takes at least like more than a couple of seconds, which is going to be a very expensive operation compared to other invalidations.
Yes, but again, even if schema is invalidated, I think couple seconds, it doesn't matter more. Like the bigger question is how client, like for client to know that it can filter by this field, it should be implemented in specific way. Even either it.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done. My mistake.
No, you have something to add, right?
I wanted to agree with you. Olga is right, and I can say specifically that the PWA project is already querying the schema at build time. So any information about the capabilities of the platform or the capabilities of the instance, we expect to find in the schema. The document here mentions that schematizing custom attributes doesn't provide customer value or very much. And I understand that there are some downsides to it because queries are not always portable. But the upside to it is that when we're compiling an app, we can query the schema to see what types are possible. And if we have, say, a component for the front end that only handles a particular custom attribute, then it could detect that custom attribute is not in use and remove it from the compiled application, which is an optimization technique that's very important to us because we're building extensible apps. So that's one reason for us to want custom attributes to be available in the schema without querying on a particular product.
Okay, and how do you deal with AAV attributes, like the attributes that admin just adds?
Our idea is basically to have two possible interfaces. One is querying the schema and detecting custom attributes presence, maybe identifying them with a directive for build time, and the other would be an interface much like this proposal. It looks good because, like you said, we need to iterate at runtime as well. We were just hoping to also have this information present in the schema.
Okay. Okay, so in general, I think the idea looks interesting, but what I would suggest for this proposal is to describe use cases and expected workflows. So for example, one workflow is adding a custom attribute which happens in the code, and just let's describe who is involved, who should be doing what. Like how PWA developer will be affected, like how he should interact with backend developer, whatever. And then what happens if an admin creates an attribute? So right now we need to clear the cache, and then PWA application somehow also needs to know that schema is updated. So I'm not sure if this happens somehow. But another, so it would be good to have those flows described. It would help to understand us what we want to achieve and what will be the most optimal solution. And another note that I have is that schema is just one part. So GraphQL is just one part, which is just presentation layer. But then there is also reindexing of the data itself. So when an attribute is added, it can potentially, I believe it can have some default value or whatever. Or when we move to separate data storage for storefront APIs, which will be used by GraphQL actually, it means that this data and schema should be updated in this data storage as well. So there will be more, there is more work anyways if an attribute is added, an attribute which should be visible on the front end, on the storefront.
Okay.
So yeah, that's just another comment that yes, we may solve GraphQL part, but then we will hit the wall because of data, like reindexation or whatever. So it would be good to cover that part, but or maybe we can just discuss it later. But ideally, if you at least can add workflows here in the document.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
One more thing, you propose to remove cache, but we still need to get some data that was cached before. And it actually means that, yes, we are saving 2 seconds on schema generation, but now we need to extract the same data for each request. So probably it will have some impact on performance of storefront API or something like that.
Extract the data from the aggregations, you mean?
So I think you propose to add the attribute type to aggregation, or is it already agreed? I'm not sure.
I propose to add the attribute type to the aggregations.
Yeah, so we need to extract it for each request. It makes sense.
Yeah, I see your point. So you're suggesting that it might be a little expensive to do that as well.
So I think we can extract the aggregation type, and this should be cheap. For example, we can say that the provided value is in range bucket or something like that, but having the attribute type is relatively expensive.
Even I think aggregation type should essentially solve the purpose, at least what I'm trying to achieve. But yeah, I was like little underprepared for this meeting because I didn't know that this is happening in the first place. So I'll update the workflows, what Olga suggested and what you guys suggested. So, and then I can get back so we can discuss them much more in detail.
And also, can we add comparison between current implementation and proposed implementation to see what benefits and drawbacks each implementation has? That would really help.
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you. And I don't think, you were prepared pretty well, so don't worry.
Yeah.
I think it's a good discussion. And thank you for joining. I just asked you to join 1 minute ago, and thanks that you could do it. I'm glad we could discuss.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else that you want to add to this topic? If not, I'd like to discuss another one, totally different now. I don't have a proposal. Proposal will be prepared a little bit later by dev team, but I just didn't want to like wait another week. So I wanted to start the discussion. So the problem that we have, and I can share the screen for people who like to read more than listen. There is some description. It will be more organized probably in the proposal, but in general, the problem that we have is that there are customers or merchants who have who face an issue of a lot of Magento logs in production. Those are caused by exceptions happening in Magento. There can be different reasons why it happens. So a couple of reasons that we discussed is it can be that something just happened in the application, and we have repeating error, like the same error message logged in the logs. And if it's a rush time, so like I don't know, if it's Black Friday, for example, it will build up a huge logs eventually, pretty quickly. So that's one issue. That's one reason. Another reason is that logs can be just ignored, like some exception logs. So I would usually expect that those shouldn't be ignored, but probably we'll have to analyze what kind of logs are being ignored, like what kind of exceptions. Maybe there is something in Magento that causes people think that this is not an important issue, like it's not really an issue, but it's being logged as an error. Maybe there are real errors and people just don't get to fixing them. So anyways, there is a situation where a server just like just has a lot of logs. It fills the file system, and then like the application cannot, like the server cannot really work normally. So the solution that was that is proposed right now is to add nesting level to the reports that we have, and it's about var reports. So like when the files which are created for every exception, like for every exception we have one new file. So one proposal is to have at least some nesting level, because one of the issues, it's not even disk space, but inability to even list the files in there, because there are millions of them. And the second part of the proposal is to log only unique exceptions in the report. Report includes backtrace, so it's like big amount of data if we take into account that there are a lot of such files. So the proposal is that in the exception log we just log an error message, which we are doing right now, I believe, but we create only one report log for each kind of, not each kind of error, but for each error that we have, so like we don't duplicate them. So it's based, like there is some prototype implementation. It's based on calculating hash from the, I believe from the request. So based on the request and probably like exception. So based on some unique values, we calculate hash and we create file with the name of that hash, and eventually we have only one such file. So it should also help with repeating errors. So that I just wanted to start the discussion. Maybe somebody has like totally different opinion. Maybe we shouldn't fix this at all. And this should be responsibility of a site to rotate logs and make sure that they don't build up there. Maybe there are some other ideas what we should do, or some big concerns about such implementation. So if there are any opinions, let me know and I'll discuss it with that team.
Olga, did you consider the Adobe standards for the logging?
No, I didn't look at that.
We should take them into account because the login is one of parts of PCI compliance audit, and our all logging mechanisms should follow these PCI compliance rules. So they are not so clear enough. As we look on some documentation, but Adobe has multiple documents which describe different logging mechanism.
Actually, problem that reporting is slightly different than just logging. So exception is still logging and log, but additional to it, Magento have possibility to create report. So I believe internally we have discussion and proposal to remove this mechanism in next minor version of Magento at all.
Internally with whom? So like I was not involved in this discussion. Maybe we can remove it, but
Do
I
we have
didn't
log
see
levels?
any proposal or something.
Is it possible to set log levels?
Yeah, like I said, that two different things in Magento. We have logs, we write in var logs, and there are different type of row logging possibility. And slightly different that it's reporting. That is, I build some legacy mechanisms that come from Magento 1, and we still.
So which reporting do you mean? Those separate files?
Write in var reports, yeah, where we put on each exception information about exception and stack trace for this exception.
So do you propose to not put stack trace anywhere?
No, it's hard question. I don't have
because
answer.
I believe we should put it somewhere. It can be very helpful.
Solution is to put everything in one file, exception log, and we will solve the issue with multiple files, and that directory couldn't be rotated or something like that. And regarding the possibility to remove duplicates, it seems not very log native mechanism. So usually if you have the similar entries in the log files, you still keep them with timestamp, with everything, and just compress them. So usually if you have the similar message, it could be compressed pretty well.
Yes, it work good only for log if you write message, but if you try to write stack trace from Magento, it's pretty huge amount of data that it's not
to
easy
clarify.
to.
Yeah, but it will be the same. So if you put the same logs, they will be compressed very well. So they will not consume tons of space. And this seems like this is the biggest issue we want to resolve.
Yeah, like you said, if you have log rotation, that should address a lot of the issue if you lock it down into one individual log, and then you can log rotate or stream out. Yeah.
So if we are talking about log rotation, do we just say that, okay, that's responsibility of an SI to make sure that they rotate logs, they don't have exception logs?
Well, I think that depends on which environment you're referring to.
Magento.
Right. So if you're talking about cloud, we should probably implement log rotation inside of our cloud offering. But if you're talking about SI implementation, yeah, I think it would probably be the responsibility of the SI to implement the log rotation inside of the device environment.
If our cloud is already implemented, so. But so I say it's
so there is no such problem on cloud.
No, it's different because we've currently put logs exception in the exception log. Additionally, we also put stack traces and reports. So maybe we need just remove putting stack traces in a report and write all in the exception log.
Okay.
And also we already have recommendation on DevDocs about Magento installation, and there is post-installation steps that say that we need to set up log rotation with links and everything. And also we can try to use the virtualization techniques. For example, if we decide to create the Docker image for Magento, we can include log rotation mechanism inside.
Can we also look into visualization of the logs? For instance, there are tools like Splunk that allows you to visualize logs. Maybe we can, for service isolation, we will have to build some log aggregation and visualization, but we can probably add part of this in monolith. It would be like much easier to see what's going on. For instance, on the cloud, it can be a dashboard where like SIs would be able to see these logs and monitor what's going on. And if we stream these logs somewhere, then these tools would also provide the functionality of purging old data.
Okay, so that's more of a question whether we need to add something to Magento, whether we need to change something in Magento application itself, or do we say that this should be solved on the like on the infrastructure level by SI or cloud?
Yeah, but so in Magento application, as I see, instead of like writing these two files, we would put these logs into like some system that is responsible for logs. So,
but it can probably take it from files as well. Like writing to files is pretty easy.
Let's discuss first reporting mechanism, because
and
maybe we agree to remove this functionality at all and write first post to the log.
That, I believe. Product
owner. Well, having the ability to pull stack traces, I think, is pretty important. Maybe it's more of a documentation thing. Maybe it's not even necessarily an implementation. I mean, I absolutely recognize the issue of having many files, and that's an issue I think we probably should address. But having the ability to pull stack traces for observability, I think, is very important. Maybe it is just simply a documentation situation. Maybe we start at the base level. How do we integrate AWS logs to capture data into CloudWatch for AWS, for example, as a documentation feature for SIs to implement, and then further follow on beyond that into how do we then instruct people how to best aggregate logging. I think that might be a possible approach.
Okay, so I wanted to get back to what Andrei Konasov told about duplicated messages. So I just want to clarify the solution. The solution is that in the exception log, or maybe it's system log, I think it's pretty confusing right now. So let's say it's, in an exception log, we still have all these repeating messages, but we don't have stack trace. So if it's repeating, we will have multiple records. What we don't want to repeat is this report log, which includes stack trace. And I mean, we can probably move stack trace back to the exception log, but then it will probably be harder to, like, I don't know, to not duplicate stack trace. I don't know if it's a big problem or not, but if we are talking about millions of such files, we will have millions of records unless log rotation is not set up properly, like if there is some kind of spike.
Yeah, and I want to stream it to external service, so it can be also be problem if it's megabytes in seconds. And if you decide to put trace, there is pretty big amount of data per logs, so it can be a problem.
So I don't know, for me it looks pretty convenient as it is right now. We have exception log with messages in general. We can see when it happened and how many times it happened. And then you can actually go to the report log and see backtrace if you really need it. But we can probably reconsider it in the future. So let's summarize. So first thing is consider removing reporting, and under removing reporting, what do you mean, Andrei? like removing all those files at all and just putting everything in one log?
Yeah,
Okay, then still how, but and then we will have to put stack trace there.
maybe. It's additional question, put stack traces this file or not, but
Where will
for
you
me,
put it if not here?
maybe
Or
it's
no.
we can configure is user okay with putting or not. So it's another
It will
question.
be too late. It will be too late usually, I think. Like user starts thinking when something happens, right? That he cannot figure out what was the problem.
To Igor's point, being able to actually be able to aggregate that information, if you have the stack trace, you can structure that data properly insofar as that whatever external log and analytics system you decide to stream this to can properly understand it, which would be the ultimate goal of really any SI or customer.
Okay,
so the current our environments are ingesting the logs to Sumo Logic, right? And that has some quite interesting aggregations. Is that model that's something we can leverage?
Yeah, but it's still different problems that log aggregation at all. It's not about log at all. So our current logs work well. We aggregate it and it's stream it and work well. It's about reporting mechanism. Is that not it store data in separate file and it includes much more information that just logs include. So it's from logging point of view, at least our cloud browsers work well without any issue.
Maybe
okay.
I don't know, like why seems like exception log and this reports their functionality and purpose overlap a little, so it might make sense just to have exception log and not to have this reports. But would it? I also noticed that most of these reports, the stack trace is not very helpful there, because you would just see object manager trying to initialize some classes, but you even don't know what those classes are because the path is truncated after Magento namespace. Like it would be Magento / and then truncated. Maybe name of the part of the name of the module, but that's it. So maybe we can also look into improving that. It's a little bit different from the disk problem, but maybe.
Yeah, we can look at that, but maybe as a separate thing. Yeah, we can look at that, but okay, let's go back to the problem that we have. So what conclusions I have? First, look at Adobe logging, and so I can look at that. Then consider removing those reports at all, and it means that we will remove this page that shows that you can go and look in that file, look at the error in that file. So that would need some product owner probably. So like the idea is that we want to consolidate everything in the exception log. We'll need to figure out what we do with a stack trace. Maybe we just put it in there, and we need some good guidelines on how to set up the system so you have log rotation or whatever. So some monitoring to not forget about, like to not miss all those exceptions and just build up logs there.
It would be wise to also document some tips and tricks to log aggregation for our SIs. Once we have the schema and how you once you kind of nail down how the logs are going to look, maybe a good documentation representation of various different standard patterns towards log aggregation.
Okay. Okay. And regarding this nesting level that we want to introduce, so I didn't hear any opinion about that. So in my opinion, it won't really solve the problem. Maybe there are other opinions. Should we introduce this nesting level? So like just have several folders and then put files in there, so we will have not millions, but maybe, I don't know, 100,000 in each folder or whatever. There is also an approach to have nesting levels starting from a year and up to a minute. Should we look in that direction, or we probably just don't need those reports at all, and let's just...
I think our cloud team already have some implementation for the nesting level, because they all...
Actually, we discussed this implementation.
You have one level of nesting, right? On the cloud. Or this is what is being implemented. I'm not sure, because it's part of Magento, so I'm not sure what it means that you have it on cloud.
We have some patches.
Okay, so you have only one level, right? One nesting level, or no?
Latest version, yes.
Yeah, so this is one approach, and this is what we want to implement in Magento instead of just having patch for cloud. Another approach that I heard from support team is having, as I mentioned, like year, months, day, probably, I don't know, hour and minute. So like it's bigger nesting there. So my question is whether we even should look into nesting, or we should just focus on maybe removing this reporting at all. And
what is the purpose of having all of these individual files as opposed to one file for exceptions and one file for errors and things like that?
So I guess I
it's
don't
easy to find some artifacts. Actually, for example, if we have like payments request log, and the merchant facing the problem with like some transaction which made like months ago, it's actually hard to find these transactions, because you for example, you know the date, but you don't know actually how to find in your custom log rotator. If we have some defined mechanism like agreement, some log rotator will be done divided by days, or for example by months, etc. It's easier even for debugging purposes to find something.
Oh, okay. So I think a lot of that actually gets addressed by analytic systems and log aggregation systems, honestly. Do we want to try and solve that for people, or should we try and advise them on other products that can help them in that regard?
So are you asking about current reporting mechanism where we have one file per exception, or are you asking about which different files?
I think both, honestly. Just trying to wrap my brain around why you would have individual files. One
per exception, right?
Yes, yeah. It seems to me like a better practice would be to use log aggregation and push that off to a analytic system in the individual file.
So I guess so. Like I was not present when it was introduced, but one of the features that we have in Magento is when you are in production mode. So you're not supposed to see an error with backtrace on the page. You are shown a file name, like report name. It's just some digits. I don't remember. It's a hash or maybe timestamp. And then there is a message that go look into this report. So if you have access to the file system, you can go and find that report. It's like an identifier.
Yeah, also additional, because it's shown to client can provide this number to merchant and say that some exception is shown this number, please check.
Yeah, it's probably not the only solution.
I mean, you could have it in a single file with that same identifier.
Yes.
And stream that out to an analytics system that you can then search upon as a possibility.
Single files can be
single files can become too big to open sometimes. So I know that Apache creates files of like certain size. You can configure files. That file size, it will just start writing to a different file, and it will it will have a sequence number in the name or something like that. So maybe one file, but make sure that they don't grow big.
Yeah, so it's log rotation probably that you would implement.
Log rotation, from what I understood, is purging all the logs, no?
No.
No, you usually kind of archive old current log and create new one, but you still can look into multiple.
Yeah, so the basic idea of log rotation is exactly that. Yes, you just kind of purge out and rotate the logs that exist, but part of log rotation as a practice is really pushing that data, that log data out to some kind of analytics system that you can then store long term. So you can run either short-term or long-term analytics across the data set over a long periods of time if you so choose. So yeah, while part of it is purging that data, it's also storing it as well. So log rotation, when you say log rotation, really the actual act of log rotation, yes, it is purging data, but the concept around it is capturing the data before you purge it.
Okay, so let's go back to that. I guess there are many things that we can improve in our logging system. So for now, action items. Look at Adobe logging. Look at removing this reporting feature at all and just having one exception log. Figure out in the follow-up discussions what we do with stack trace. Maybe it's fine just to put what else? And we'll need best practices as soon as we figure out what we want. Like we need to understand what we want, what we recommend, and put it in the documentation. So that's, I think, first level items. There are other things that we can improve, but that's probably not so urgent.
So it may also make sense to talk to our data lake team and see if they somehow collect any data from server side. Because I know that they're using JavaScript to collect behaviors, but maybe they need
to which team? BI?
So we have some
recommendation
data science, yeah.
Okay. So to talk to them for what?
To see if they actually trying to use any server-side logs, their data lakes. I believe on their presentation they mentioned that they use JavaScript at the moment. And if they're using logs, then it may make sense to ask them what exactly they need from our logs. So maybe just another consumer.
Okay. We can probably sync with them, but I don't know whether they look in exception logs. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, there's various different technologies that we can also consider getting involved for SIs. For example, for AWS specifically, Firehose, that you can then generate those logs and push that into various different analytics systems. It's actually fairly easy to set up. SIs, I think, if we explained it to them, would be pretty easy for them to actually set up for their customers. I think it would go a long way towards giving visibility into this type of information.
Okay, maybe we can sync with you later and we can come up with some good recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, then I have some action items, I think, and okay, back to this nesting level. I didn't really understand opinion on that, so I would probably even not implement it. I think it's just hiding the problem, just postpones it.
I actually agree with that.
If we're going to change something in that area, I think it's better to remove that functionality completely.
Okay, good. Then thanks all. Interesting discussion. Anything else? Any other questions maybe or topics?
So I addressed comments on proposal about CI/CD.
Do you want to discuss it now? Show it or? Hello, can anybody hear me? Okay, can anybody hear me? Okay, I'm not sure what happened, but we'll probably just finish this meeting.